So this past year, I have been spending a lot of time with Cindy. She is the director of school for Hamilton Montessori. And it's really been my joy to discover more about this beautiful institution that is part of Unity in Marin. And I've always had an idea of what Montessori is, but I never really had a true appreciation for the deep alignment that exists between the values that Montessori carries and the values that we carry. And so, as Cindy said, it is Montessori Education Week, and so I thought, let's do a little educating. Let's look at, because I think it's also important in the larger scope of what's going on in the world, that we understand that the things that we value, quote unquote, at Unity in Marin don't exist in a vacuum. That there are lots of other organizations out there that align with what it is that we believe. And I know personally that that place of collaboration and connection is where we all feel strengthened. So one of the things that I have been holding and becoming very clear about is I know that our youth and family program, which is awesome and run by Lissa, and it's here on Sundays, and you know, it's here, it's amazing. But Hamilton Montessori is also part of our youth and family program. Can you feel that? That it is part of our commitment to instilling the values that we believe into the next generation. And what's beautiful about Montessori is they do it with, like, secularly, and yet it completely aligns, right? So this is Maria Montessori. She was amazing, actually. She really was. She was brilliant woman. And she was an Italian physician, educator, and innovator. She was acclaimed for the educational method. The idea behind it was that children can learn naturally, that there is an innate awareness that the child has, that is our job to nurture. Not to tell the child what it is that they need to know or learn, but to cultivate the child's capacity to fulfill the things that they know that they are called to learn. And she brought this scientific approach to the process. So she observed children, she experimented with different ways of interacting with them to learn what teaching methods worked best. And what she arrived at was something that was incredibly child-centered. And if you try to imagine what the world was like in the late 1800s and early 1900s, nothing was child-centered. I mean, really think about that. Nothing was child-centered. And so she puts forward this approach that the teaching of children should be centered around the child. So the first Montessori school opens in 1907, which I had no idea that the longevity of the Montessori tradition is that long, that it goes back to 1907. And so she started off experimenting and discovering and putting the pieces together for her process of how to engage children. First, she was working with those who were disadvantaged, sort of capacity-wise. And then she got invited to work with people who were disadvantaged, just culturally disadvantaged, right? And what she discovered is that the children thrived with her methodology. Thrived. Were able to learn how to focus, able to learn how to pay attention, or learning how to trust something within themselves. So the Montessori system is based on the belief of the creative potential of children, their drive to learn, and the right of each child to be treated as an individual. Can you feel how radical that was in the early 1900s? That child is an individual? The Montessori philosophy is characterized by individual initiative and self-direction. Right? And everything that the teachers are doing in the Montessori structure is to foster this understanding of what children are actually capable of. Now, I want us to also hold that as I'm talking about what children are capable of, what am I also talking about? What we're capable of, right? This is what we're capable of too. This doesn't go away. This is something that we still have available to us. So a Montessori classroom would look different than even most classrooms nowadays. Like, our education system hasn't really evolved all that much from the 1900s. Sit down, practice your letters, practice your numbers, do it over and over and over again, right? She puts a premium on freedom of movement, on the choice for students. She puts a premium on allowing the children to circulate freely. They get to choose the activities that interest them. Student interaction and peer teaching, problem solving, and socialization are all encouraged. And students are challenged according to their ability levels. So there isn't this sense of, you need to hit this particular marker because that's like the average of what all kids are supposed to know or do or be. There's an understanding that there's an innate ability that is unfolding between each child, and we are being invited as the adults in the room to support that unfoldment without putting them down, without telling them what to do. How many of us do that for ourselves? I mean, really, how many of us allow ourselves the freedom to not get it right and to figure it out and to not have to hit a certain standard or a certain level, but to just revel in the act of learning itself, that there's value in that. I love this quote by her. Do not tell them how to do it. How many people grew up being told how to do something? She says, do not tell them how to do it. Show them how to do it, and do not say a word. If you tell them, they will watch your lips move. If you show them, they will want to do it themselves. So can you feel how everything is about refocusing the energy, not on mimic me, do as I do, but more about watch how I model something and then go explore. This is how innovation happens. If we are consistently telling ourselves and those around us that this is the way to do something, where does innovation happen? We stall, we get stuck, because nobody feels like they can break open. So Unity and Montessori actually have a very long history. So in 1952, Dr. Elizabeth Kaspari, there's some 52, 53, there's different dates out there. So We Wisdom was a magazine that Myrtle Fillmore wrote from the late 1800s that was for children. And in 1952/53, Dr. Elizabeth Kaspari, who studied with Maria Montessori in India for almost 4 years because they got stuck there during the war, and so she just dived into like in-depth training. She came to the States, because they couldn't go back to their own country after the war, and opened We Wisdom Montessori School in Unity Village. And so there are actually Montessori schools in a lot of unities that are actually all called We Wisdom. Right? So there's a long history of an understanding of how the values, the shared values, how it all interconnects. And Myrtle had a particular passion for children and for understanding that children are the future, and that bringing our principles, our understanding to them at a very young age was important for them to be able to be the place for transformation and change and, in the world. So here's some of the shared values. Cindy at the end might come up to me and go, I'm not so sure about that one. I don't think so, though, because I found quotes from Maria Montessori that back them all up. So this idea of divine potential. Now, the language that Montessori might use might be different than ours, but this idea, she says, free the child's potential and you will transform him into the world. So Montessori recognizes the unique potential in every child. And the whole point of Montessori is to foster an environment that will nurture their strengths. Does that sound similar to what we believe in Unity? Because we see each person as a unique expression of the divine. We see each person as having unique gifts and talents, and that you're here to share that with the world. You, personally, yes, you. Not the person sitting next to you, but you. And so all of that is worthy of love and respect and dignity. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had learned that in preschool? Right? If that had been instilled in us in preschool? So there's this awareness of that divine potential, and then there's also this understanding of oneness and interconnectedness. So Maria says we are all part of the cosmos, and the cosmos is part of us. Doesn't that sound like Unity? So throughout the educational process for Montessori, the children are guided to understand their role in the greater cosmic whole. And that there's a big focus on ecological awareness, right? Of how the earth and we are one, and that's something that we need to pay attention to. And so in Unity, we obviously believe that there's only one power and one presence, and there's this interconnectedness with the greater cosmos. And part of our mission statement is to care also for the planet, right? That's something that we know is vitally, vitally important. This one, I think, is the biggest point of connection, actually, which is the inner guidance and self-directed growth. So Maria says, respect all the reasonable forms of activity in which the child engages and try to understand them. Not the other way around. Not saying to the child, why are you doing that? They need to explain it to you. Our role is to understand their unique perspective, because there's value in that. And we shut our own selves down all the time. We don't think that our ideas have much value. And so in Unity, we know that our spiritual growth and mastery arises from within, right? It arises from that inner awareness of something. And that as an individual, we're all empowered to go and find the thing that feeds and nourishes our soul. How many people in here also have a Buddhist practice? Right? How many people in here also have any other kind of faith practice? Right? We are allowed to in Unity, there's an understanding that we get to be inspired where we're inspired. We get to know, but it's all coming from that inner guidance. And what it is that we're called to do next is something that we know is self-directed. We believe in choice, always believe in choice. And then experiential learning, which I'm going to line up with spiritual practice. This is where they sort of come together. So Maria says, the hands are the instrument of man's intelligence. And so Montessori believes that learning happens through hands-on experience, reflection, and practical life activities. We are a practical teaching. That's what we say. We're here to make those life activities, the things that you do every day, connected. So we know that personal and collective transformation happens as we live these truths. Some unities even say it's not enough to know them. We have to live them. And that's the hands That's the hands and feet. You'll hear people say we are the hands and feet of God. It's because things that stay in idea land are wonderful, but they're also really vague. And we know that what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. So we are being invited to create something that isn't vague. And the way we do that is by actually living it, by trying it out, by testing it in the real world. And then Montessori has Maria Montessori, she left Italy because of the fascist regime and the rise of fascism, and she was very clear that peace is a priority, and it's not something that the government can do. That peace is something that has to come from us. And so there's a large component of Montessori education that is focused on peace, peacemaking, compassion, being of service. So I love this quote. There were a lot of quotes around peace, and I picked this one. The child who has felt a strong love for his surroundings and for all living creatures will be able to have a heart that is strong and full of noble sentiments. She's talking about creating peace warriors, right? She's talking about instilling in children an understanding of our interconnectedness. It's just that all living creatures, it's not just the people who are in this child's immediate surroundings, it's all living creatures. And when we have that understanding within us, then we are able to be strong in the face of things that feel very overwhelming. Anybody resonating with this right now? So Montessori emphasizes peace, cooperation, and community service. And the language that we would use in unity might be loving kindness, generosity, and service, right? All as being something we're being invited into as a spiritual practice. And as I was working on this, I kept thinking, it's fascinating because Montessori sort of is in that secular world, and we're in the spiritual world. And we talk a lot about spiritual practices. What if we took the spiritual out of it? Like, what if we stopped separating that out from the rest of our lives? What if it's just the way we practice living from a heart that is strong and full of noble sentiments? What if we showed up with generosity? What if we showed up with courage? What if we showed up with a voice that is saying yes or saying no? That is what I believe we are all being called to step into. The child is both a hope and a promise for mankind. An education capable of saving humanity is no small undertaking. It involves the spiritual development of man, the enhancement of his value as an individual, and the preparation of young people to understand the times in which they live. As you read that, I want you to know that that's you. Just because we may not feel like a child anymore, we are not separate from this. Do we actually understand the times that we're living in right now? I don't know, I feel lost sometimes, right? And that's part of my work. Part of my work is, how do I understand the times we're living in? How do I hold that? Am I standing in my capacity for spiritual development? And what is the goal? Is the goal just my own well-being? Is the goal just my family's well-being? Is my goal just everyone in Unity and Marin's well-being? Or is my goal truly about transforming planetary awareness. We say that in our vision statement. We say that the vision is a world spiritually awakened through the realization of our divine potential. And can you feel how Montessori is right there with us in that? For me, I found it kind of comforting. I was like, oh, we're not alone out here. It's not just quote unquote spiritual communities that are committed to a place, a space of growth and advancement and more peace and more harmony and an awareness of our interconnectedness. It's not just quote unquote the spiritual realm. It is something in time and in space. And I think that I was teaching the history and development of New Thought in Sacramento for the past 2 Saturdays. And yes, of course, we teach what we need to learn, right? So the question that I posed at the end of, 10 hours, 9.5 hours of historical awareness of how New Thought emerged and the different branches it took and how it's evolved and changed over time. And I asked my students, I said, what's the next evolution? What's the next evolution? Right? What is it? And Maria and Cindy would say, children. Children. Place our attention on the children. Right? That's where the next evolution is going to arise from. But that does mean that we have to be different in the world. We have to step out in a different way. I don't know about you, but, I'm like well past childbearing years, right? So I got to kind of reorient myself as to okay, how can I be in service to whatever this next iteration is? But it's not what we're living right now. That expression, if you're not growing, you're dying. So how as a movement, do we want to grow? What is the next piece that we are all being invited into? And I personally, for me, it feels like it's about a more global awareness. It's about getting out of the bubble of the immediacy of my world. And it's about really being involved in this larger understanding of how we move forward peace and justice and equity and inclusion, all the things that we value. And we need us right now, not to be silent in the face of what's been arising. Because the world is more interesting with all the diversity, isn't it? They've done studies that show that companies that have diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, that they are stronger, their earnings are better, the workplace is healthier. Yes. All of those things have been proven to be true. And then we get the reactivity around all of it. And it's on both sides. There's a lot of reactivity happening right now. So how are we being called to stand in this? What is it that we are called to be and to do? And how do we support the next generation? Right? Or not even the next generation, the generation before the next generation. This scripture kept coming to mind for me. Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, remember, understand in unity, we understand the kingdom of heaven as being right here. It's within us. So how do I enter the kingdom of heaven? I can't do it with my adult, cynical, jaded perspectives on the world. There is something within me that needs to be like the child, that needs to explore and try and test things out and not feel like I'm being put into a box. It is the innovation of the entire unity movement is being invited to arise out of the fact that, can we take ourselves out of the box? Whatever box you put yourself into. I mean, I know it might feel kind of comfy in there, and sort of, maybe you got a little nest that you've built up over time in there, but there is a whole wide world that needs the gifts that you have, and only you. And if you're in your little cocoon, then there's a huge piece of the puzzle that's missing. You can think of how we bring our genius together like the way the choir is singing in harmony. And if all of a sudden you pull out a voice, and then someone else says, oh yeah, I'm going to go in my nest too. Oh, and I'm going to go in my nest too. And then all of a sudden the harmony stops harmonizing. Your voice matters. Your voice absolutely matters. Because growth, whether it's intellectual, emotional, or spiritual, is an inner journey, and we have to nurture it. We have to nurture it with respect and a sense of that interconnectedness. So how can you nurture this within yourself? And then the next question, don't stop there. How can you nurture this within others? And let's take this into a time of meditation. Just listening, right? How can you become like the little child? Where do you have beliefs or ideas about yourself, about others, about the world that have become so calcified, so rigid, that it feels like they're providing you with stability? But maybe what they're actually doing is providing you with a place to hide. So the invitation is to just breathe into whatever might be stirring within you. Thinking about these shared values, how does that awareness of oneness live as you? How do you nurture and support your divine potential? And how do you support and nurture the divine potential of those around you? How do you nurture the divine potential of those you never see, never meet in person? I think about the civil rights movement, and I think about the strength of those individuals, and I think about how they knew that what they were doing was not for them, that what they were doing was for the next generation and the next generation. How are you being invited right now to realign, to recenter yourself on what it is that will support the next generation? So we breathe into our own divine potential. And we breathe into our capacity to choose, to decide. Just notice where there might be resistance to whatever the practice is that you're being invited to step into, the interaction with the world. And let's take a few minutes in the silence to just listen. Listen to who and what we are invited to become, to stand more deeply in our values, in our principles of truth. Hush, hush, someone is calling your name. Your light, your genius, your love, your passion, your unique gifts and talents are calling your name. How are you being invited to make that a reality? To take it from the idea world and make it tangible. Make it real. And as we go forth this week and for each week after, just the invitation is to just allow that question to continue to reverberate, knowing that in every moment you can choose anew. In every moment you can say yes to that which is calling your name. How grateful I am for this opportunity to rest and to know that I am all that I need to be, and that in my unique magnificence I am loved. How good it is to know that you are all that you need to be, and that in your unique magnificence you are loved. Releasing it all, knowing it's done. In agreement, I invite you to say with me, and so it is. Amen. Ashe.